Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Raising Cane studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Raising Cane studio downtown in the capital city on this Monday. I hope your work week hasn't even started. Hope you're off today. National holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We're here, though, so if you are working, we'll get you to the finish line on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Denton Day at the bottom of hour number 2, previewing tonight's matchup between Indiana and Miami for the College Football Playoff National Championship. I'll do that a little bit later on as well. LSU basketball gets a win in the PMAC on Saturday. We'll discuss it. Big weekend in the NFL playoffs as well, so we'll get into that. But it's got to start with the portal, right? Always start with the portal. We'll do that with our opening drive.
Welcome to the big league.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive. Presented by Fabry Chevrolet GMC in St. Francisville.
It's been a fever dream for 2 weeks, essentially. Basically 3 at this point. But it's winding down. It's not over. It's winding down. LSU has completely overhauled its football roster. You're talking about more than 35 additions at this point in the transfer portal. And they may not be done. There are 2 guys that have been on campus today, and that's where we're going to start. Because I think these are difference makers at positions of need, and they're important positions on the football field. They just happen to stare at each other. The first is left tackle. And Jordan Seaton is the biggest fish in the sea here. And LSU has established itself as a potential landing spot for Jordan Seaton. This is something we discussed on Friday, so we're not going to rehash it in its entirety. But to refresh things, this would be a big-time difference maker immediately. There are some players that LSU has taken in this portal class that I look at, in my opinion, and say, maybe a depth add, a little bit of risk there. That might not work. It might, but it might not. And then there are some that you look at and go, that's a difference maker. And immediately, if you bring Jordan Seaton in, that's a difference maker. And LSU, right now, probably doesn't have an all-SEC left tackle on its roster. Could Devin Harper develop into that? Sure. Perhaps one of these young offensive linemen that you've recruited, developed, can blossom into that. It could happen. But if you go get Jordan Seaton, you get an all-SEC left tackle. You go get a guy who was a consensus top 5 player in the country when he came out of high school. You get a guy that walked onto the field at Colorado and was their starting left tackle from day one. Played in every game as a freshman, played in 9 games as a sophomore. He did not allow a sack as a sophomore at Colorado. Now, I wouldn't suggest the Big 12 is exactly like the SEC, but you go out there at left tackle for 8-9 games and you don't allow a single sack, that's playing. And I checked out on ESPN.com today. They had a look ahead to the 2027 draft. Not the one that we're about to have, 2027. And they listed 2 or 3 players at every position to keep an eye on in next college football season. And Jordan Seaton was one of the offensive linemen on that list. So you look at high school pedigree, you look at college production, you look at NFL prospects, Jordan Seaton checks every box. And oh, by the way, LSU has a hole there at left tackle. You bring him in, and all of a sudden, you start to change the expectation level in my eyes. This is a team, it's interesting to think about, because when you looked at LSU after their 3rd, 4th loss of the 2025 season, and you looked around at that roster, you would have said, well, there's not going to be a lot of this back next year. Probably going to take a step back next year. And then you get the coaching change, and then the portal opens up, and you're seeing how quickly you can transform a roster. And right now, there's just not a lot of people better at doing that than Lane Kiffin. I would suggest he probably doesn't want to sign 35 kids a year. But if he has to go sign 35 kids, he can go sign 35 kids. and this one would be probably the second biggest. You got to have quarterback. Levitt becomes the biggest. But offensive line was second on this list, and he's the best offensive lineman. So you're talking about two positions of dire need. Your quarterback room was empty, and your offensive line was in exodus. And you may go get the best one available, according to, not me, the people who rank those on 3, 24/7, all those sites. Levitt, number one quarterback. Seaton, number one tackle. You may address those two needs with the best player available. That would be an incredible thing for Lane Kiffin. So that's one that has been on campus, was on campus yesterday, was on campus today. We'll see if he goes to Oregon or not. Take that visit. Oftentimes, in this recruiting world, if you can get a commitment, your job is to make sure that they stay, commit, and don't make the next trip. Now, LSU wasn't able to do that with Sam Levitt. He went to Knoxville. He went to Miami. He came back. It can still work that way. But ideally, you would like to tell Jordan Seaton, hey, you're committed to us. Sign this piece of paper. Don't even fly to Eugene. It's a long way up there. Long way to go. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of hours, whether or not he makes that trip up to Oregon. But LSU is optimistic on Jordan Seaton. I feel like there's a reasonable chance LSU will land the number one offensive tackle in the portal. Now, you look across the line of scrimmage, Prince William Unmielen. That is a former Ole Miss Rebel, edge rusher, led Ole Miss in sacks this past year with 9. Bends the edge, makes plays in the backfield. He was the Rebels' best pass rusher in 2025. And I talked about this on Friday a little bit as well, but now it looks to be a little bit more crystallized. LSU's pass rush just wasn't very good this past year. Like Harold Perkins got his 5-6 sacks, but the guys on the edge, Pyburn, Payton, Butler, Relaford, those guys didn't necessarily make big impacts on the edge. And you've gone out in the transfer portal and you went and got Jordan Ross and you hope that he can, but he hasn't. And you've gone out and added some guys on the edge, but nobody with this kind of proven production in the SEC. And now Prince William Unmielen does make the visit from Oxford to Baton Rouge. And reading what the folks over in Oxford think, it feels like he's headed to LSU. And you might say, well, wait a second, didn't he announce he was committed to Ole Miss? He did. And he signed. So LSU is going to owe Ole Miss buyout payments if Prince William Unmielen elects to transfer to LSU. If you agree to terms on a revenue share contract and you break that contract, there are financial penalties. And LSU will be burdened with those should Prince William Unmielen come on. But if you're LSU, you're thinking, well, that's just money. We take Ole Miss's best pass rusher away and we add him to our what was a weak pass rush, and you get better. So it's just cost of doing business. Got to make it happen with money. It's a whole new world. I really could not have envisioned 7 years ago me sitting here and saying, yeah, LSU is getting Ole Miss's edge rusher, but he already signed a contract with Ole Miss. That would have been foreign anyway. And LSU will have to pay $500,000 or whatever the number ends up being to Ole Miss to take their player. Whatever. That's the world we're living in now. But that is a proven game changer on the edge to make things happen for an LSU defense that struggled to do that last year. And when we talk about offense and defense with 2025 LSU and 2026 LSU, like the offense is going to be a whole different world. But the defense has a lot of its DNA. You've got the coordinator, you've got the safeties coach, you got the corners coach. Baker's still coaching linebackers to an extent. You still have Kevin Peoples. Like, you have a lot of the same scheme, same personnel on the defensive side of the ball. Linebacker's going to look very similar. Corner's going to look very similar without Delane. You've got some guys back at safety. McKinley's back. Like, there are a lot of things that are similar on defense. So one of the things that you were weak at was on the edge, at edge rusher. Unmielen helps remedy that. So these are two game-changing pieces that LSU would like to add here. I don't know if that's the end of the line or not, but it feels like if I were just, I'm educated guessing, okay? Educated guessing. So not a complete shot in the dark, but certainly not sourced and final. I would suggest Prince William Unmielen is an 80% lean to LSU at this point. 20% he would end up back at Ole Miss. I think he's headed to LSU. That's the feeling from the Ole Miss side. I think he's going to be a Tiger. Seaton, I don't have that kind of confidence in. I think it's probably just north of 50%, 55% that LSU gets him. he gets on that plane to go to Oregon, I think it dumps back down to 50, maybe a little bit below that. But we don't know that yet. I don't know his whereabouts currently, so I'm just making it, like I said, an educated guess. There was some confidence at LSU earlier today, but confidence can be fleeting in this world. All it takes is one phone call, one offer, one flight, and things change on a dime. So those would be monster gets for LSU. And I feel like if you could get Prince William and Jordan Seaton to LSU at those two positions, left tackle, edge rusher, I feel like you're looking at a top 10 preseason team. And some of you may roll your eyes and go, they're already top 10 preseason team. I don't know. I don't know what every roster looks like. But just based on filling needs, talent level, I told you there were a lot of league average players that I thought LSU added. That was the line that I used 2 weeks ago when I looked at some of the additions on the offensive line, some of the additions on the defensive line, some of the additions at wide receiver. I thought, well, you're probably adding like league average. This is not league average. Seaton's one of the best tackles in the SEC tomorrow if he comes to LSU, and Umar Mielen's already proven himself to be a great edge rusher in the SEC with 9 sacks for an SEC team. So you're getting difference makers if you can get those guys. That's the hope at this point for LSU. If anything breaks between now and 3 o'clock, we'll certainly let you know. And if it breaks before 6 o'clock, Matt will let you know coming up on After Further Review. If you're looking for our LSU content, you can always find it at louisianasports.net, and you can find it at Hunt on LSU, wherever you find your podcast, or, of course, on YouTube. We will take a timeout when we come back. Let's talk a little bit about the game tonight down on South Beach. I've got an angle on this that's local, and I got a rooting interest tonight. I'll tell you about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is the website, HighlandIG.com. We tell you about commercial property and casualty insurance all the time over at the Highland Insurance Group. They do a fantastic job with it, but that's not all they can do. They can also do your group or employee benefits. So if you're a business owner, you're a CFO or an HR, and you're in charge of handling the benefits, you got to make sure that those are the right place, because that's big for you to recruit talent. It's big for you to maintain and keep talent around. We're talking about the transfer portal. Transfer portal works professionally too. If you don't have the best opportunities for your employees in terms of health insurance and benefits, they may leave. Don't let that happen. If you have a bad renewal coming up, there's one carrier that's really driving up those premiums. You want a second option? Highland Insurance Group is happy to help you with that. They're located here in Baton Rouge. They can help you out statewide. Property and casualty, they got it. Group employee benefits, they got that as well. It's the Highland Insurance Group.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
So tonight, Indiana and Miami will play for the national championship. I'm expecting a pretty good football game, but I have a rooting interest, and I didn't feel like I would as of the second Ole Miss lost. Once Ole Miss was out, certainly A&M was out, I'm like, okay, I'm stress-free here. I don't really care who wins. I don't care if Indiana wins a national championship on its face. I don't care if Miami wins a national championship. I don't have any emotional tie to those two programs at all. Not any. My emotional investment is largely rooted in the SEC. I've got a little bit of hatred for Notre Dame because of the way that they operate independently. I just think it's ridiculous. But essentially, the SEC's got all of my emotional investment. Indiana's in the Big Ten. Miami's in the ACC. I don't care if they win or lose. Until people start tossing around the 2019 LSU Tigers. And when that happens, you get my emotional investment. I have talked about this many times on this show. I don't ever get sick of talking about the 2019 LSU football team. Ever. I'll do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it whenever. It was awesome to watch. It's the best college football team I have ever seen. And they just happened to play for my alma mater. It was an absolute freight train of a football team. And if Indiana goes out there tonight and wins this game by 20 points in Miami, you will hear people start to talk about Indiana in the same conversation with 2019 LSU. And I have no interest in entertaining that discussion. None. I was reading a preview piece on ESPN.com today, and it suggested that Indiana, this iteration of Indiana, probably has about 6 draftable players. Draftable. 2019 LSU put 5 guys in the next first round. I just did the math. 24 dudes who played roles on that team, big roles, got drafted. 24. 5 in the first round. You're looking at beyond the quarterback, Mendoza, Pons, Surratt, guys that they're projecting to be 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks. And yes, like, I understand that just draftability doesn't create the best team, and that's kind of what Indiana's been built on. But as I've said previously, and I said last week, we can't play the game, okay? The 2025 Indiana team can't play the 2019 LSU team. That's not a game that can happen, right? We don't have time machines. We can't jump in the DeLorean and go figure this thing out. So all we have are statistics and data points that we can point to talk about this. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to take a team that had 5 first-round picks in the next draft, that had 24 dudes that were drafted over the next 3 years, that had 14 players drafted total the next spring, and talk about a team that has a few third-rounders on it. This is a different era of college football. You can't build the juggernaut anymore because everyone leaves. What was Nick Saban doing to create the dynasty he created? He was just stacking 4- and 5-star recruits over the course of a decade, and they couldn't go anywhere because if you left, you had to sit out a year. So he just had a bench full of 4- and 5-stars. That's how you create a dominant team. Indiana has a bunch of 3- and 4-star recruits who aren't going to go in the first round. They're not as good as LSU was. They're a great team. They're probably going to win the national title tonight. They're going to have 14 guys drafted in a few months. Burrow, Chase, Jefferson, Stingley, Delpit, Phillips, Chason, Queen, Terrace Marshall, Clyde. Then you look at the offensive front. Cushenberry signed the biggest center deal in NFL history for his second contract. Damian Lewis, NFL starter. Sadiq Charles, NFL starter. Like Ed Ingram, NFL starter. I don't have any interest in entertaining this Indiana squad with LSU. And the thing that I love to hear is, well, that LSU team had a bad defense. Hold on. They played a poor game against Vanderbilt. I'll grant you that. Vanderbilt scored too many points. Now, LSU could have scored 100 that day if they needed to. 100. Jamar Chase just running wind sprints up and down the Vanderbilt secondary. The defense didn't play great. And then they couldn't tackle John Rice Plumlee. That is correct. They couldn't. But that defense, by the end of the season, was nasty. They played a good game against Alabama. The 2 long passes to Devontae Smith where Stingley wasn't looking one time, I don't really know what to say about that. And there was a punt return involved. But that Bama team in 2019 is better than anybody Indiana's played all year. Anybody Indiana's played all year. With Tua, Smith, Waddle, Ruggs, of course, the beast of a running back, Najee Harris. That was when Saban was still building superpowers. And LSU stared him right between the eyes in Tuscaloosa and punked him. And then that defense stood tall against Texas A&M, stood tall against Georgia, was really good against Jalen Hurts and CeeDee Lamb in Oklahoma, and was really good against Trevor Lawrence, first-round pick. Etienne, the ACC's all-time touchdowns leader. T. Higgins, who makes $40 million a year in the NFL. Really good against those guys. That defense had pros all over the place. So, like, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Like, this is the very definition of just turning your back on the congregation at large and preaching directly to the choir. I know you know what I'm saying. I just need to get this off my chest. Because I am not here to talk about the merits of an Indiana team that was built in the transfer portal era with very few draftable players because they're winning in an era that's completely different than the one LSU showed up in 2019. So I have a rooting interest tonight. It is very clearly with the Miami Hurricanes. I hope they line up and just punk Indiana tonight. Run the ball. Fletcher. Bend the edge with Bane and Mesidor and get after them. I feel like all I need is a close game. I just can't have Indiana win by 30. And I don't think they will. I think Miami's too tough. The problem tonight is that, as I said, and look, I said this about the Ole Miss game too, it feels like Miami's only got one path to winning. And you can suggest they deviated from that a little bit in the Ole Miss game because they did have to go down and score at the end, and they did have to use the air a little bit. But their way to win is to lock Indiana in a cage and maul them. Like, you've got to play it between the tackles, play it at the line of scrimmage, don't let it get out into space. But Indiana can win different ways. They've got a quarterback that can go beat you. They can spread the field. They can run the ball. It's just an incredibly well-coached team. And I think to the genesis of this segment, talking about the dominance of 2019 LSU and comparing them to this Indiana team, that conversation dovetails for me into just how good a job Curt Cignetti and his staff have done. Because I don't believe they're nearly as talented as a lot of these great teams that we talk about. I don't believe they're going to produce 8 Hall of Famers or whatever the 2001 Miami team did. But they play great. And that's a credit to what Cignetti has done. This was my point before Indiana smoked Alabama. They're not doing it with this massive influx of talent, and they're not doing it with the revolutionary style of play. They're just really good at the simple stuff, and that's been good enough to get them home. I'm concerned as an LSU fan rooting for Miami about Cignetti against Cristobal. I think that's a mismatch. I'm concerned about Mendoza versus Beck. I think that's a mismatch. But none of that matters if the offensive line for Miami and the defensive line for Miami win at the point of attack. And it's their only way to win the game, but I just need them close. You get me within 6 points here, and I can stand on that thrashing of Clemson and that thrashing of Oklahoma and feel like nobody's really going to aggressively come at me here. But if Indiana gets this thing cooking in the third quarter and they win this thing 38-13, I'm going to have to turn off ESPN. Like, I can't, because I'm not going to listen to somebody try to tell me that Indiana is as good as the 2019 LSU team. I'm just not going to listen to it. You can keep talking, have your discussions wherever you want. I'm not listening. I'm not here for it. No shot. Jordan, you watched that LSU team play.
I did.
You've seen Indiana play.
I have.
Do we need to have this conversation?
No, man. And honestly, my biggest gripe really is that knowing that the Big Ten could be, this will be their third national championship in a row.
Yep.
At this point.
3 different schools.
Yeah, and the noise is already so loud about the SEC's falling off. Oh, y'all can't pay players anymore. So that's really where my concern is trying to pipe down the Big Ten because they're chirping real loud, and this will even incentivize them. And then I get it. SEC's we've been kicking butt for a long time. So I get it, but that's where I'm at. And you already know. It's all about you, baby.
I have no conference pride whatsoever.
No, I get it. No,
I want everybody in the SEC to be miserable failures except one school.
Oh, no. Look, and I'm not the old, kumbaya, I was going against Ole Miss. Like, I hate it. And I wanted Georgia to lose if Georgia saw somebody else, but I would rather the ACC get this one. That's all I'm saying. I would rather the ACC because I just hate these Ohio State, Michigan guys. They just been chirping too much. So let's nip this in the bud.
I'm curious what that crowd is going to look like tonight.
Oh, Indiana all day. All day.
I mean, it's a home game for Miami.
No, it is, but you know Miami fans are notorious. Yeah. Like, they don't really I think they said they need their own stadium on campus, not, share with the Dolphins or the Hard Rock, whatever.
Yeah. I would agree with that on Coral Gables action, but it should be here's what I will talk with Denton about the game tonight later on today, but I think Miami's going to play them close. I think Indiana's going to win, but I think Miami's going to hold their own because I think they're going to run the ball, they're going to play good defense. I'm a little concerned with their injuries in the back end. That's a big deal with corner. They got Jabari Antoine out there, Louisiana boy running around.
The guy suspended
for targeting.
Yeah.
So there's I think Indiana scores a late touchdown maybe to separate, and that might even cover. But I think this thing goes into the fourth quarter something like 24-14, 24-17, and then maybe Indiana gets one more score to nudge it out to 2 scores and win it. But I don't see 41-14 coming. I really don't. And look, Indiana's done that to some teams, but I just don't see it tonight.
I know, and I agree with you 100%. And this is kind of a hot take, but I think that would be a program debilitating loss if Miami gets blown out basically at home in the national championship. They have to keep it close.
We'll see. That's my sob story about LSU in 2019. Don't talk about Indiana with that team. That team is special. You want to talk about 2001 Miami, maybe that Nebraska team mid-90s? We'll have that discussion. You want to talk about Indiana? I'm out. All right, when we come back, LSU got a victory on the hardwood on Saturday. What does it mean? We'll talk about it.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Fabry Chevrolet GMC, Highway 61 in St. Francisville. Under new ownership, Fabry family. They've been here for 35 years, 3 locations, 5 brands, now proud to be your stop for Chevrolet and GMC. SUVs are hot in 2026. You want a new Suburban? They got them at Fabry Chevrolet GMC. You want a new Tahoe? They got them at Fabry Chevrolet GMC. Had a friend roll up to the house yesterday in her new Denali. It's a gorgeous vehicle. It's big. It's a gorgeous vehicle. If you're looking for that, you can get that as well at Fabry Chevrolet GMC. Got Yukons on the lot. You can see them all at FabryChevrolet.com. You've been doing business with the Fabry family for 35 years. Do it in St. Francisville on Highway 61. Check out that entire inventory at FabryChevrolet.com. FabryChevrolet.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Denton Day from SiriusXM's College Football Overtime in 1 hour, talking about Miami and Indiana from South Beach. Preview the national final with our guy Denton. It'll be our last Monday visit. He's good enough to spend those Mondays with us during football season, so check in with him one more time coming up in 1 hour. I want to talk a little bit about LSU's basketball win on Saturday. I told you on Friday, do or die. That's it. And if you can't beat Missouri at home, Thomas or not, then you're toast because you're not going to go to Gainesville and win. You're not going to go to Arkansas and win. That's 0-7, and that's the end of the line. So everything was on the line for LSU on Saturday, and they played a really good basketball game. They really did. They played well. For the second game in a row, LSU came out and did a great job on defense in the first half. Missouri missed their first 7 shots. They started the game 3 for 13 from the floor and 4 of 17 from the floor eventually. And LSU built that nice first half lead just like they did against Kentucky. And this time they were able to hold on. You got a great effort from Markel Sutton, who played his best game as an LSU Tiger. He was 7 of 14 from the floor, knocked down a couple of threes, got to the foul line for 14 free throws. He made 10 of them, scored 26 points in his 34 minutes. You had to have that. Without Thomas, somebody's got to step up and go score, and it can't always be McKinnon. And we've seen Nwoku essentially fizzle. He hasn't done anything since Thomas left. So you got to count on some guys on the perimeter, and you saw that from Markel Sutton, who was assertive and really played great in the game. McKinnon tossed in his 20 points as well. It took him 19 shots to get there, but he made 4 of his 10 threes, and he played 38 minutes. He's given you everything he has, and you've got to have it from him offensively. And LSU did a great job of taking care of the basketball. Without your starting point guard to only have 7 assists, I think that's good. And one of the things I was thinking about on Saturday when this game ended, I'm looking at them going, God, they just – if Thomas had gotten hurt in November – and it would have allowed Jalen Reese to play a lot in November, and it would have allowed, or if it would have forced McKinnon and King and Sutton to be a little bit more assertive and look for their own shot. And then if he'd have come back for SEC play, man, you really might have something, because they've kind of figured out now how to play without Thomas. They're scoring points. They scored 78 points against Missouri. They got a 20-point lead on Kentucky, who's a decent defensive team. Like, they scored against Texas A&M, who's really frantic defensively and can cause problems. They figured out how to play without Thomas, but it cost them 2 or 3 games. And if you look at this LSU team, like y'all know this. Y'all know that we have watched some really bad LSU basketball teams in the last 20 years. Can we agree on that? There have been some bad teams. The first Matt McMahon team was awful. The last Johnny Jones team was awful. The last Trent Johnson team was awful. there have been some really bad basketball teams. This is not that. This is a team that's in a bad spot. They're probably not going to make the NCAA tournament because they're losing too many games at the front end of SEC play. But if you just step back from if you don't look at 4 years of data, it's fine to do that big picture. Do this exercise with me. Just because I know most LSU fans are go, this is 4 years in, who cares? And I get it, but we cover the team. I'm going to spend 10 minutes talking about the team. It's in season. Baseball practice started last week. We'll get to it in a second. But if you take out 4 years of data and you take the record away, which is impossible, but just look at the quality of play that you're getting. What does it look like on the floor? Well, you went on the road to Texas A&M and you played them to a tie game with 3 minutes to go. Texas A&M is currently leading the Southeastern Conference at 4-1. They're tied with Florida. But you went on the road to A&M and you played them straight up for 38 minutes. The South Carolina game, you played the worst 10 minutes of basketball you've played all year, and you almost scrapped your way back into it, but you lost the game. Terrible loss. Got it. You played Kentucky. Kentucky just went to Knoxville and erased an 18-point lead. They've got a $22 million roster, and with 1.7 seconds to go, you were leading Kentucky. And you beat Missouri. And not to mention, in the non-conference, you beat SMU, who's having a good go of it in ACC play. And your one loss was to Texas Tech, who's now in the top 15 and playing great. Like, if you look at the quality of play from LSU basketball this year, it's not that bad, especially considering the circumstances. And it took them a little bit, but they now know how to play without Thomas. King's giving them good minutes, handling point guard responsibilities. I hesitate to call him a point guard, but he's running the point. Sutton's being a little bit more assertive. McKinnon has found his offensive groove. They've defended really well early in games. Like, they're still a bad defensive team in a lot of stretches, and that's a bad deal. They're not a great team. I'm not calling them a great team. But if you take out 4 years of data and take out the SEC record and you just assess, well, how are they playing? They're playing okay. They really are. Now, they're going to lose 2 games this week, and we'll be back on the negative side of the coin. Like, there's a positive right now. You won the game. You should have beaten Kentucky. You played pretty well last week. But the fact of the matter is that's going to flip on its head over the next 7 days. And when you look up, they're going to be 1-6. And at 1-6, where they're going to be, you would essentially have to go 7-4 the rest of the way. That's going to be the task. And there are still games coming up with teams that you should beat. Oklahoma's not great. Mississippi State's not great. Auburn's not great. Like, I don't think Ole Miss is great. And you play all these teams coming up. But you put yourself in a spot that is just going to be too difficult to dig out of. So ultimately, I think I know where this is headed. I'm hopeful that they play better. I'm hopeful that Thomas shows up at some point this week. I wish there was a better update on his injury as opposed to, well, he's just not really cleared. He's day-to-day, day-to-day, day-to-day. We don't even know what the injury actually is. But to put a bow on this, I fully support y'all's right and feeling to look at this and go, I don't care. We stink. They haven't been relevant in 4 years. Like, that's the general consensus about LSU basketball. And I can't fault that one bit. But one, I like watching LSU play basketball. I like LSU basketball. And two, I cover the team for this show and for LouisianaSports.net. And I'm going to talk about it for one segment before and after they play games. The quality of basketball that LSU has played starting in November to now has been good enough to be an NCAA tournament team. They have not cut breaks. That's a terrible break in the Kentucky game. And it was really unfortunate that South Carolina threw a blitzkrieg at you that they really haven't replicated since. And you wish right now that you could look up and instead of being 1-4 through 5 games, you could beat 2-3 or 3-2. And I think you'd have a chance, but you're not. Ultimately, you are what your record says you are. You are a 1-4 team. You will be a 1-6 team. You can look at a 4-year data sample size and make decisions about this basketball program. All that is completely fair. I'm doing an exercise independent of that just to kind of give another angle to this discussion. But ultimately, the only thing that does matter is what the scoreboard says, what the record book says. And right now, that's not good enough for LSU. Is it all LSU's fault? No. Is it significantly due to LSU's misfortunes? Yeah. So I was thrilled. They got a win on Saturday, kept things alive. We'll see if somehow, some way they can catch a heater and steal one this week. I don't see it. I think that's two of the toughest places to play in the Southeastern Conference, in Fayetteville and in Gainesville. Then we'll see what they can do beyond that. I know that my eyes tell me they're better than what their record is, but it doesn't matter. What matters is what your record is. And ultimately, it's going to be 1-6 here pretty shortly. And that's how you shape the narrative. The conversation is what it is. So that's it for some LSU hoops here on this Monday. Got to tell you about friends at First American Bank and Trust. First American Bank and Trust. Looking for a commercial loan? Do business with First American Bank and Trust. Why? Well, they started in 1910. That's 116 years ago. I think they got a pretty good handle of what they're doing there. And they've grown. 25 locations throughout Southeast Louisiana. That means two things. One, there's always one near you, convenience. And two, that they've got the resources behind them that can handle whatever it is that you're looking for in your commercial loan space. They've got the resources. I tell you about the great customer service, and oftentimes that small town feel that you get at First American Bank and Trust means a lack of resources. Mom and pop shop can't quite do what the big boy banks can do. That's not the case. First American Bank and Trust, they got 25 locations to prove it. So walk on in. You'll see somebody and recognize what happens when you're in First American Bank and Trust, and do business with them. Get your residential loan, get that commercial loan. It's First American Bank and Trust. First American Bank and Trust. We will step aside, come back, and close out the hour. Still plenty to do here on this Monday. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Lifetime Roofing. You can find them online at lifetimeroofingla.com. It's January, and that means they can now offer a lifetime workmanship warranty. What an amazing gift that they can give you there with that new roof. A lifetime workmanship warranty. You just don't hear that in the roofing world. How about financing options? Of course, if you're purchasing a new roof, that can be something that's cost prohibitive to some people. But if you've got the ability to finance it, it can lessen that burden. You're talking about 0% up to 18 months. Maybe you've got a sizable deductible that is 2%, something like that, and you're thinking, you might want to finance that as well. They can finance deductibles. They are happy to help you with that. They've got a great team over there at Lifetime Roofing. It's a growing team. It's a phenomenal facility over there just off College Drive, and they are happy to help you here in the South Louisiana community. They'll get you that deductible finance. They'll get you that full roof finance over the course of 18 months, and they'll get you that lifetime workmanship warranty. It's Lifetime Roofing. You can find them online at lifetimeroofingla.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Wrapping up hour number one here, Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Hope you're getting a little time off. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day here on this Monday. But we're working, so if you are too, we'll get you to the finish line. Big game tonight. We'll talk about it with Denton Day coming up at the bottom of hour number two. I want to talk a little bit about LSU's offensive line here in the last segment here. Right after I got off the air on Friday, LSU got a commitment from Maryland offensive lineman Alu Ba. Ba was a starter for the Maryland Terrapins for the last 23 games at right guard. And these are the kind of additions that I was talking about on Friday's show when we mentioned Sean Tompkins, who comes over from Baylor, who was a starter there, who's committed to North Carolina, comes over. And we think Devin Harper was very likely a starter at Ole Miss next year after his true freshman season in Oxford. And you start to look at actually putting together an offensive line and going left to right. And I'm starting to feel a lot better about LSU's offensive line. I did a segment on this on Friday, but it did not include Ba, and it did not include Jordan Seaton. And LSU has not gotten a commitment from Jordan Seaton to my knowledge yet, but he has been on campus, and it's certainly possible. So let's just be pie in the sky. Let's just be super optimistic here. Let's call Jordan Seaton an LSU Tiger. What if we do that? Okay, that makes this exercise a lot more fun. He's the left tackle for sure. I put Devin Harper slotted in at left guard. We'll see. He could be a tackle. He could be a guard. Braylon Moore is your center. I've got Alu Ba, who started 23 games at right guard for Maryland, at right guard. And then I've got Weston Davis out at right tackle. So Seaton, Harper, Moore, Ba, and Davis. That doesn't even include Sean Tompkins, who has started at Baylor, the Bordelon brothers, Solomon Thomas, William Satterwhite, who was a backup at Tennessee this past year at center, and then Darren Stray, who was a backup at Kentucky. And it doesn't include the junior college additions that LSU has made. It does not include lower-level players. You're talking about Jaquan Sprinkle. This is just high major guys. Seaton comes from Colorado. Harper comes from Ole Miss. Moore, Virginia Tech to LSU. Ba, Maryland to LSU. And then Weston Davis, who started his career at LSU. Then Tompkins from Baylor. And then you're talking about Satterwhite from Tennessee, Stray from Kentucky, and then some guys that you brought in to develop in Bordelon, and Solomon Thomas. All of a sudden, that starts to look pretty dadgum good. And I would suggest that if LSU could get Jordan Seaton and map this out similarly to this, I don't know if I've got this right position for position, but it's close. I would suggest LSU might call its offensive line a strength as opposed to a question mark. On Friday, I gave you it's solid instead of a question mark. It started as a concern. When you look up and everybody's gone and you may not get Braylon Moore back, like it's a crisis at offensive line for LSU. But she just started chipping away, and you got some depth pieces early. Nobody's going to throw a party because you got a commitment from a Copiah Lincoln Community College player and a North Carolina Central starter. That's not going to move the needle very much. But she just kept chipping away and kept bringing guys in for visits. And now all of a sudden, you may fill out your offensive line with proven starters from Power 5 leagues. Now, you got to make it mesh together. And we know from the last year that just because you had 5 stars by your name doesn't make you a superstar on the offensive line. Everybody else you trotted out there on the offensive line over the last 2 years has been a 4 or 5 star recruit, and they couldn't block anybody on the ground. But this is starting to look really good. If you don't land Seaton, I'm not sure exactly who your left tackle is. You've got a lot of guys with guard and center experience and not a lot of tackle experience. But if you do land Seaton, it just pushes everything into place. And it would just be a monster deal if LSU could get that to the finish line. Because if you start talking about an offensive line that includes Seaton, Harper, Moore, Ba, Davis, Tompkins, that's 6 for 5 spots. That's probably a strength. We know that Lane Kiffin wants to get behind pads and run the football. We know you've got a quarterback who's been productive when given some time. You know that you've assembled a ridiculously deep core of wide receivers, and all of a sudden, you've got real depth at running back, including some high-end talent at that spot as well. You've got all the pieces around that offense to make it go, but you can't do anything if you can't block. Last year's LSU football team is a perfect illustration of that exact concept. Perfect. Because you had Barryon Brown and Nick Anderson and Aaron Anderson and Xavion Thomas, and the list goes on and on and on. Trey Green, and you couldn't complete balls down the field. You couldn't make plays. You had Harlem Berry and Caden Durham. You couldn't run the ball because you can't block. But if you can block and you can let Lane Kiffin get into his bag with the guys that he's brought in this transfer portal class, the speed, the home run hitting ability, the veteran quarterback, it starts to look really, really good. And I've been really, really hesitant and very, very slow to accept this offensive line as, I hesitate to use the term championship caliber, but I think that's what I'm going to use, championship caliber, because that's what the conversation kind of starts with at LSU. You're getting there. I can be convinced of it. Seaton's the linchpin. Without him, it becomes a little bit murkier because I don't know who the left tackle is, and we'll see what happens at right tackle with Weston Davis. You brought in a lot of guys in the portal that have played a lot of guard. So to go get a tackle would just be huge. Now, the thought was that Devin Harper was going to play tackle at Ole Miss in the fall. And maybe he's a tackle that can come in and play it. But proven one helps. And we'll see if Jordan Seaton gets on that plane and goes up to Oregon or not. But if they can keep him around and you start to look at where these guys come from and what they've got to their name and what they've done at the collegiate level, it's an exciting thing. And I already know this, Seaton or not. The excitement level in this town for that Clemson game is going to be through the roof. As I said in the first segment of the show today, I personally, this may not be a universally held belief, but I personally looked at this roster in October and November and said, man, next year is going to be quite a rebuild. Like, I don't know if they're going to be able to stock the shelves adequately with as much as leaving. And Lane Kiffin's done it. And he's created a reasonable sense of optimism in this town. You're always going to be optimistic in August. It is what it is. It's a new football season. I'm sure they're optimistic about the Browns every August too. It never works out. But this, I think, would be well-founded based on the additions that LSU has brought in. You've got difference makers. You've got depth. You've got talent. The offensive line was kind of the last thing to get squared away, and they're starting to make it happen. So hopefully Seton is the last piece of that puzzle, and you can put together a really solid offensive line that could be a strength of the team when I could have never suggested that was a possibility a week and a half ago. But here we are. Kiffin's pretty good at this portal thing, y'all. All right, that's it for hour number 1 here on this Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. If you missed any of the content today, started talking LSU football, gave my thoughts on 2019 LSU against this Indiana team, even though I don't want to have that conversation. I did it. You can find all that discussion at Hunt on LSU, wherever you find your podcasts. And we also took a little bit of time to discuss LSU hoops as well. We got a lot to do in hour number 2 on this Monday. Of course, Denton Day is going to be with us coming up at the bottom of the hour in 30 minutes. I want to talk about the wildness of the NFL playoffs. There's a trend in the NFL that I'm having a hard time getting on board with, but I'm going to have to because it seems like I'm wrong and the NFL's right. So we'll talk about that. Also, some more transfer portal discussion in hour number 2 as well. So we'll step aside and pause for some national headlines with SportsCenter. I'm sure they'll have a lot of discussion about the firing in Buffalo earlier today. Crazy coaching carousel in the National Football League, but I'm sure they'll talk about the national championship game as well. So we'll step aside for those national headlines. We'll come back with hour number 2. This is a Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.